There are 8 different types of flowers in Stardew Valley, and today they are my only source of income. Hey everyone, my name is Extreme, and in this challenge, every single coin I earn has to come from flowers. No crops, no animal products, not even honey. Now that might sound easy, but unlike my previous challenges, I'm not aiming for the Joja route this time. Instead, I have set myself a much bigger goal. I need to earn 300,000 gold within the first year, more than double what it takes to complete the entire Joja route. Not lifetime earnings, by the way. I need 300,000 gold sitting in my wallet at the same time. So if you enjoy cozy Stardew challenges built around unusual restrictions, planning, optimization, and some very questionable decisions, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's jump in. I started by creating my character, named the farm Flower Farm, picked this cat, and chose the forest farm so I could get plenty of mixed seeds for farming XP along with mixed flower seeds. The rule is simple, I'm only allowed to sell flowers, but I can plant anything, and shout out to Adrian for recommending the challenge. So I started day 1 by collecting the parsnip seeds and clearing out the farm. Time for some quick information. There are 2 flowers available in spring, tulip and blue jazz. Here are the seed prices, base selling prices, and growth times for both. Considering all those factors, blue jazz is the better option. It takes 1 extra day to grow and costs 10 more gold than tulips, but it gives a 20 gold profit instead of 10, so we'll mainly prioritize blue jazz. With that sorted out, I bought 16 jazz seeds and 1 tulip bulb from Pierre and planted them alongside the parsnips and 3 mixed seeds. The only artisan product flowers can produce is honey, but I'm not gonna make honey because I don't want this video to turn into a honey only challenge. Though if you'd like to see that as well, let me know in the comments. I'm also keeping as many weeds intact as possible so they can spread and give me more mixed flower seeds later in summer. The next day I gave a dandelion to Penny. Nobody needs to ask where I got that dandelion from. Now you might be wondering about daffodils and dandelions. They are flowers too, right? Well, yes and no. They're flowers in real life, but Stardew Valley categorizes them as forage items rather than flowers, so they don't count for this challenge. I was also spending a lot of time chopping trees for 2 reasons. First, I needed sap for basic fertilizer, and second, for game plan 1, unlock the tapper recipe. For that, I needed foraging level 4. Why do I need tappers? Because I'm planning to make speed grow and deluxe speed grow later, which require pine tar and oak resin respectively. I reached foraging level 3 on day 3 and also started planting acorns for future oak trees. I don't need to plant pine cones since there are always plenty of pine trees in the cinder sap forest. Some crows were also helping themselves to my crops, but there wasn't much I could do about that because the scarecrow requires farming level 1. On day 5, I harvested the parsnips. The mines also opened, so I started pushing through the early floors and reached floor 30 by the next day. Day 7 was finally time for my first flower harvest, a single tulip. I sold it for 30 gold and immediately bought another jazz seed from Pierre. Nothing too exciting, but one frustrating thing, however, was the fact that I couldn't find the ladder anywhere on floor 36. I broke every stone on the floor and fought bats, spending over 10 in-game hours on that floor. Still nothing. That was one of the most rage-baited mining experiences ever. The next day, the blue jazz were ready. I harvested all 13 of them and sold them to Pierre for 686 gold. It's not a huge return on 480 gold investment, but we've only just started and spring isn't exactly known for having the most profitable flowers. With that money, I bought 22 jazz seeds and 1 tulip bulb and planted them in a sprinkler layout. Sprinklers and quality sprinklers are going to be some of the most important items in this run since I might end up filling the entire farm with flowers later. I also reached floor 40 that same day and started collecting and smelting iron. And finally, I ended the day by reaching foraging level 4, unlocking the tapper recipe. Game plan 1 completed. At this point, I already had all the resources needed for sprinklers. The only problem was that I still hadn't reached farming level 2. The next few days were spent gathering resources and making making more progress in the mines. I reached floor 80 on day 13 and started collecting gold ore. I also hit mining level 5 that day and chose the miner profession. On day 14, I harvested 1 blue jazz, 1 tulip and some rice shoots. Still no farming level 2, which meant I had to keep watering everything manually. I sold the flowers to Pierre and bought 3 jazz seeds. While planting and fertilizing them, I realized I had completely forgotten to fertilize the previous batch. The weeds were spreading surprisingly fast. I finally decided to make tappers as well, 14 of them. I placed them all on pine trees. Later, I can simply move those tappers onto oak trees once I have enough pine tar. The next day, it was time to harvest another blue jazz patch, and finally I reached farming level 2. Unfortunately, I had a new problem. I didn't have any copper bars left. I had used every single one the previous day while crafting tappers. I sold the flowers to Pierre for 1132 gold and immediately turned that money into 37 jazz seeds and 1 tulip bulb. Then I planted, fertilized and watered everything and ended the day unlocking the sprinkler recipe. Now here's game plan 2. Unlock the quality sprinkler recipe. Basic sprinkler was easy, only farming level 2, but the quality sprinkler recipe requires farming level 6, which needs a proper plan. For that, the summer mix seeds will be a huge help. Day 16 was dedicated entirely to collecting copper. By the end of the day, I had crafted 20 sprinklers and placed them around the farm. The next day, I adopted the cat, and let's be honest, you guys know I'm terrible at coming up with names. On day 20, I adopted the cat and named it Larry. So I need your help. Go down into the comments and suggest a name for my future cat in the next video. I'll pick my favorite one. As for this cat, I ended up naming him Meowth. The sprinklers started working immediately, and watching them water crops that used to take a huge portion of my day was incredibly satisfying. Now all I needed to do was wait while continuing to collect resources for future items like quality sprinklers and speed grow. On day 18, I reached floor 95 in the mines, and this was where I made the first major mistake of the run. That day I hit foraging level 5 and chose the forester profession. I picked it because I knew I'd need an absurd amount of wood throughout the challenge. But here's the problem. 2 of the upcoming flowers later in the run can also be foraged, which means gatherer and later botanist would have been significantly better. And let me warn you right now, this wasn't my only mistake. I've made quite a few in this challenge, so please bear with me. Day 19, the first batch of pine tar was ready. On day 20, I got the star drop from floor 100. The next day, I harvested 3 blue jazz and 1 tulip. I sold them to Pierre and bought 6 jazz seeds and 1 tulip bulb. This was also the last possible day to plant blue jazz. On day 22, it was time for the final large blue jazz harvest. While harvesting them, I reached another farming level. I sold all the jazz through the shipping bin, but looking back, I really should have sold them directly to Pierre and immediately spent all the money on tulip bulbs. There was still enough time left in the season for tulips to grow, and even that small profit margin would have been better than letting the gold sit in my wallet. Like I said, I have made a few mistakes during this run, but that's part of the challenge. I was figuring things out as I went. I also unlocked the speed grow recipe that day, but I couldn't craft any yet because it requires moss, and I ended the day with 2035 gold. To put it nicely, that's pretty terrible, especially when the goal is 300,000 gold. At this point, things weren't looking great, but I'm still optimistic because the upcoming flowers are far more profitable, and spring was mostly about building the foundation for everything that comes later. Still, I expected a little more. Before we continue, I just want to mention that we are now only around 60 subscribers away from reaching 1000, and considering that 73% of you watching still aren't subscribed, we only need about 1.5% of those viewers to hit that subscribe button for us to reach the milestone. So if you're enjoying the video and would like to help the channel grow, subscribing right now would genuinely mean a lot to me. And as a little thank you, I'm planning to do a special 1000 subscribers Q&A video, so make sure you are subscribed. And now let's get back to the challenge. Starting on day 24, I also began collecting bone fragments, not because I needed them immediately, but because I might need a lot of deluxe speed grow later, so I decided to gather them passively whenever I had the chance. Day 25 and 26 were pretty uneventful. Day 27, I sold 1 tulip and crafted 7 charcoal kilns for future coal production, and that's how the final day day of spring arrived. I harvested 6 blue jazz. I almost sold the salmon berries too, but thankfully you can get back the last item you put through the shipping bin. I know spring was a little slow, but it was still a productive season. Right now I have sprinklers, resources for more sprinklers and quality sprinklers, a farm covered in weeds ready to generate mixed seeds and mixed flower seeds, and 2071 gold ready to invest on summer day 1. So let's end spring here and see what summer has to offer. Welcome to summer. First things first, I started cutting every single weed on the farm. Information time again. Here's the plan for this season. Summer has 4 flowers in total: sweet pea, summer spangle, poppy and sunflower. The last one also carries over into fall. For sweet pea, my plan is to craft and plant summer seeds. Between summer spangle and poppy, both gives a profit of 40 gold per flower. But despite taking only 1 extra day to grow, summer spangle seeds costs half as much as poppy seeds. So summer spangle is the clear winner here, since I can buy twice as many seeds for the same investment while keeping the same profit margin. As for sunflowers, I'm going to avoid them for now. The seed cost is pretty high and I'll be getting sunflowers from mixed flower seeds in fall anyway. And yes, I'm saving all the mixed flower seeds for fall because they are much more valuable there thanks to fairy roses. So at this point, my priorities were summer spangle and summer seeds for sweet peas. After clearing the weeds on the farm, I bought 48 spangle seeds and then continued cutting weeds outside the farm. This was also the moment I realized I really should have picked the gatherer profession for collecting sweet peas. And just for clarification, I'm allowing myself to sell any sweet pea, whether it's foraged from the ground or grown from summer seeds. After clearing all the weeds, I ended up with 26 mixed flower seeds and 62 mixed seeds. The mixed flower seeds were saved for fall. I crafted 10 summer seeds and started planting the spangles, but there wasn't enough time left in the day, so I ended up sleeping on the ground. The next day I finished planting everything. The spangles got fertilizer for profit. The summer seeds were for sweet peas, which would eventually turn into profit as well, and the mixed seeds were mainly for farming XP. I also had to expand the farm with 15 more sprinklers. I already had resources for quality sprinklers, but I still needed 3 more farming levels to unlock them. On day 3, I planted 20 summer seeds and 4 mixed seeds. While continuing to expand the sprinkler setup, I sold 2 gold quality sweet peas. Then I removed all the tappers from the pine trees and moved them into oak trees, since deluxe speed grow had become the bigger priority. I ended the day with 150 gold. With that money, I bought 3 spangle seeds the next day and planted them alongside 2 mixed seeds and 10 more summer seeds. Over the next few days, I kept selling sweet peas to pair, planting more spangles, fertilizing every single spangle seed, harvesting wheat, hot peppers and radishes, collecting resources from the mines, and slowly working toward more farming levels. Those harvests eventually got me to farming level 4. On day 9, the first batch of summer seed crops was ready. Out of 10 summer seeds, I got 5 sweet peas. Since I didn't have quality sprinklers yet, I only planted 20 more summer seeds and sold the 3 silver quality sweet peas along with 1 more I had found while foraging. I ended the day earning 248 gold. On day 10, the summer spangles were finally ready. While harvesting them, I hit farming level 5, which meant I could choose the tiller profession for the 10% crop value bonus. So instead of selling flowers that day, I waited until the next morning after taking tiller. Since it was the luau, I had to use the shipping bin instead of Pierre. I also tried a different method of getting mixed flower seeds by cutting weeds in the mine floors and managed to get 7 of them. Not bad. I ended the day earning 6,560 gold. Pretty nice considering we still have enough time to grow summer spangles 2 more times before the season ended. On day 12, I harvested 3 spangles and started preparing space for future quality sprinklers. I sold those flowers to Pierre and invested every single coin back into summer spangles, buying 143 seeds in total. That's a great number. First, I filled every available tile in the normal sprinkler area. Then I planted another 82 in the new section, and of course I fertilized all of them. Now I just needed to water them manually until the quality sprinklers were unlocked. The next 3 days were basically a cycle of selling flowers, buying more spangle seeds and planting them. On day 16, I harvested summer seed crops, hot peppers, corn and summer squash. That finally pushed me to farming level 6. Quality sprinklers were officially unlocked. Game plan 2 completed. The next day I crafted 30 quality sprinklers. I actually had enough resources to make a lot lot more, but I didn't need that many yet, which also meant I could finally stop watering everything manually starting tomorrow. I planted 40 more summer seeds that day and continued collecting oak resins in the background. Day 18 brought green rain. This was one of the most important days of the entire run because I wanted as many mixed flower seeds and as much moss as possible. So I spent the entire day cutting weeds and finished with 24 mixed flower seeds and a huge amount of moss for future speed grow. The next day, while collecting bone fragments, I finally found a glow ring, and on day 20, the second batch of summer spangles was ready. Flowers like spangles and fairy roses are surprisingly annoying to harvest because every color variant stacks separately. I sold all spangles to pair for over 17,000 gold, and you already know what's coming. I bought the inventory upgrade for 2,000 gold and reinvested the rest into spangle seeds. Over 300 spangle seeds. Today was the last possible day to plant them, so I decided to go all in. I planted every single one and fertilized as many as possible. I also hit farming level 7 by the end of the day. On day 21, I sold a few more spangles to pair, and this is where I finally learned from my spring mistake. There were still 7 days left in the season, not enough time for more spangles, but enough time for poppies, so I invested all my money into 23 poppy seeds. I also crafted 40 summer seeds, planted everything, and expanded the quality sprinkler layout even further. The next day, I harvested hot peppers and a few spangles, which pushed me to farming level 8. That unlocked deluxe speed grow, also the cake recipe, but that's completely useless for this challenge. I earned a little over 1500 gold that day. There wasn't enough time left to plant anything else this season, so from this point onward, every coin became part of fall investment fund. I know fall hasn't started yet, but let me give you a bit of information so you are prepared beforehand. Fall has two flowers, sunflower and fairy rose. My goal is definitely fairy rose since it gives a massive 90 gold profit per flower, but there's one big problem. Each fairy seed costs 200 gold. That's expensive, and on top of that, fairy roses take 12 days to grow. So to make them worthwhile, I desperately needed deluxe speed grow. With deluxe speed grow, the growth time drops from 12 days to 9. That's a huge difference, which means I need two things before fall arrives: a lot of gold to invest in fairy seeds and a lot of bone fragments and oak resins to craft deluxe speed grow. So from the next day onward, I started making it. I crafted 70 deluxe speed grow on day 23 and another 65 on day 24. Now time for the next plan. Game plan 3, get the agriculturist profession. For that I need farming level 10 and I'm already at level 8. The agriculturist profession makes crops grow 10% faster, which means fairy roses with deluxe speed grow would grow in just 8 days instead of 12. That's absolutely massive. I placed 8 more tappers on day 25. Now let's skip to day 28, the final day of summer. The farm was completely covered with flowers and a few other crops. It looked like this, so I started harvesting everything, and let me tell you, picking up that many flowers took a very long time. While harvesting them all, I managed to reach another farming level, which meant I hit farming level 9, still no level 10, but considering how much XP fairy roses give, I'm pretty confident that won't take much longer. Now here's every flower I harvested. Let's sell all of them, and just like that, summer ended with a total profit of 44,586 gold. That's honestly insane, especially considering every single coin came from flowers. We started the season with barely over 2,000 gold. Now we are sitting on more than 44,000. Of course, there's a still long way to go, but for the first time, this challenge actually feels possible. So let's move on to fall and see what happens when fairy roses finally enter the picture. Fall is here. Right now I have 65 mixed flower seeds and over 49,000 gold. I planted all the mixed flower seeds and used deluxe speed grow only on the fairy rose seeds. From those mixed flower seeds, I got somewhere around 35 fairy rose seeds. Then I spent almost all of my gold on fairy seeds from Pierre, buying 245 of them in total. I only planted 100 that day though, because I had exactly 100 deluxe speed grow available. And from this point on, let's just call it DSG. saying deluxe speed grow every single time is getting a little exhausting. The next day, I collected 10 oak resins, crafted 50 DSG, and planted another 50 fairy seeds. Day 3 was very similar. I collected 12 oak resin, crafted 60 DSG, and planted 60 more fairy seeds. On day 4, I harvested the corn, but still didn't get farming level 10. I collected 9 oak resin, crafted 40 DSG, and planted the final 35 fairy roses. On day 5, I placed 9 more tappers. Days 6, 7, and 8 were spent mostly collecting bone fragments. Finally, on day 9, it was time for the first flower harvest of the season. I harvested 30 sunflowers and got 28 seeds back. So I replanted those seeds, sold the sunflowers, and bought 15 fairy seeds. I crafted another 50 DSG and planted those fairy seeds with it. The next day, the first batch of fairy roses was ready. Just look at all of them. I crafted 75 more DSG, bringing my total up to 116. Then I decided to craft a unique item that would become a huge help for this challenge, the seed maker. I made 7 of them and started converting flowers into seeds. A total of 134 fairy roses turned into 250 fairy seeds and 7 mixed seeds. I immediately started planting because there wasn't much time left. Unfortunately, I couldn't finish. I had 26 seeds left and ended up sleeping on the ground. But that day finally gave me farming level 10 and I chose the agriculturist profession. Game plan 3 completed, which also means every flower planted after this point will grow even faster. Day 11 followed almost the exact same routine. Harvest fairy roses, collect oak resin, turn flowers into seeds. The only difference was that I had far less DSG available because I had completely run out of bone fragments. To compensate, I made 210 regular speed grow and used that as well. The older DSG plots were helping a lot at this point. I also had plenty of mixed seeds, but there was no reason to plant them anymore since I had already reached farming level 10. Day 12 was more harvesting and more seed converting. At this point, I was still confused whether seed makers were actually better than simply selling the flowers and buying seeds from Pierre. After thinking about it for a while, I came up with a new strategy. Starting on day 13, I sold all the silver and gold quality flowers, then used that money to buy new fairy seeds. Meanwhile, all the normal quality flowers went into seed makers. Since normal quality flowers aren't worth nearly as much, this seemed like the better option. Using that strategy, I planted 98 fairy seeds that day with speed grow. I also wanted to remove some of these boulders to create more planting space, and don't judge my scarecrow placement, I'm not an expert, but this is what the farm looked like at the time. The next 3 days were mostly uneventful outside of collecting resources. Around then, I also did some testing in a separate save file and discovered something interesting. Fairy roses with deluxe speed grow plus agriculturist somehow only take 7 days instead of 8 and take 9 days to grow with regular speed grow plus agriculturist. So the final planting days became day 19 for speed grow and day 21 for deluxe speed grow. On day 17, I harvested sunflowers again. This time I got 28 sunflowers, replanted 20 seeds and earned 2948 gold. The next day, I harvested 98 fairy roses. Using the same strategy, I turned the normal quality flowers into seeds while selling the silver and gold quality ones. I even got ancient seeds from the seed makers, but they are completely useless for this challenge. I also gave my pickaxe to Clint for the copper upgrade and crafted 85 DSG. Then I planted a total of 207 fairy seeds. After filling the existing plots, I mostly used regular speed grow. Day 19 was a massive harvest day. The farm looked like this, and harvesting everything took forever. By the end of it, I had collected 283 fairy roses. I sold all the silver and gold quality flowers for over 75,000 gold. Then I immediately bought as many fairy seeds as possible, ending up with 375 of them. The normal quality flowers stayed in the chest for seed maker duty later. After expanding the farm even further, I managed to plant almost everything. Out of the 375 seeds I started with, only 34 remained unplanted. Day 20 was a smaller harvest. I planted the leftover seeds from yesterday and decided that would be the final planting session of the season. I had no DSG left, so there wasn't much point continuing. I also started storing every flower to sell all of them later together. Now it was time for the final plan. Game plan 4, the greenhouse. The goal was to unlock the greenhouse before winter, and for that I needed the Joja route. Now I know I could have used the community center instead, but there's a very important reason I didn't choose that route. I forgot. Yeah, That's literally the reason. So I needed 35,000 gold for the greenhouse repair plus another 5,000 for the Joja membership. I also needed exactly 432 fairy seeds. Each greenhouse batch can hold 108 crops using quality sprinklers, and I was planning to grow 4 full batches. That's where the number comes from. Finally, I also needed 108 DSG. Thankfully, that part wasn't difficult. Over the next few days, I kept harvesting flowers, converting seeds, collecting bone fragments, and crafting deluxe speed grow. Now let's skip ahead to day 27. The farm looked like this, completely covered in flowers, and once again, harvesting everything took forever. In total, I collected 586 fairy roses. After running a few of them through the seed makers, I ended up with 433 fairy seeds for the greenhouse. Unfortunately, I couldn't repair the greenhouse that day because it was Spirit's Eve, which meant I could no longer grow 4 batches of fairy roses during winter, only 3. To actually fit 4 batches into winter, I would have needed to buy the Joja membership by fall 25th, order the greenhouse repair by fall 26th, and plant the first batch on fall 28th. But anyway, I sold all the flowers normally and earned a ridiculous 239,210 gold. That's absolutely mind-blowing. It's so fascinating to see how much profit we can make by limiting ourselves within the items we usually take for granted. And that's how the final day of fall arrived, along with one last harvest. I bought the Joja membership for 5,000 gold. After subtracting the greenhouse cost, I still needed roughly another 100,000 gold during winter. And don't worry, the 3 greenhouse batches of fairy roses aren't my only plan for winter. There's still one final flower left, but before that, let's wrap up fall and head into the final chapter. And here begins the final chapter. Welcome to winter. And with winter comes the final flower of the challenge, crocus. Crocus can either be foraged from the wild or harvested from winter seeds. So I started the season by ordering the greenhouse repair for 35,000 gold. Then I crafted 10 winter seeds and planted them. Winter seeds work very similarly to summer seeds. The main difference is that crocus has only a 25% chance of appearing instead of 33% that Sweet Pea had. The next day, the greenhouse was finally ready. I planted the first batch of fairy seeds using deluxe speed grow, obviously. At this point, the daily routine was pretty simple. Collect winter forageables, craft winter seeds, plant winter seeds, repeat. So that's exactly what I started doing. I planted 10 winter seeds on day 3, another 10 on day 4, 20 on day 5, and 14 on day 6. During this process, I also discovered that winter root can be put into the seed maker to create winter seeds. And interestingly, winter root is the only winter forageable that can do that. On day 7, it was time for the first winter seed harvest. Starting on day 8, I also began randomly tiling snow around the valley to find snow yams and winter roots. Surprisingly, that strategy worked pretty well. I planted another 50 winter seeds that day. Before we continue, I'd quickly like to thank the channel members Niamet, Tapseltaps, Rocksap, and Nikanuk for renewing their memberships. Thank you all so much for the continued support. And if you'd like to support the channel as well, you can become a member too. To be completely honest, I can't offer anything super special besides members only posts and early access to videos, but it would genuinely mean a lot to me if you decide to join. And if you can't, that's totally fine. Subscribing and liking the videos also helps. Alright, back to the challenge. On day 9, it was time for the first fairy rose harvest inside the greenhouse. I harvested the flowers, replanted the seeds, and stored the flowers since I wanted to sell everything at the very end. Now, let's not drag winter out longer than it needs to be. For most of the season, I was doing 3 things: crafting and planting winter seeds, harvesting winter seeds, and harvesting and replanting fairy roses. Day 16 was the second fairy rose harvest. Day 23 was the third and final harvest. And here is a list showing how many winter seeds I harvested and planted up to day 23. Days 20, 22, and 23 were especially huge harvest days. At this point, the farm looked like this. So on day 23, after harvesting both the winter seeds and the final batch of fairy roses, I decided it was finally time to sell every flower I had collected throughout the entire season. Here they all are. I'm way too lazy to count them. So let's just sell everything and hope it's enough to reach 300,000 gold. I earned a total of 132,560 gold, which means we officially completed the challenge. We successfully achieved our goal of earning 300k gold using nothing but flowers. So what do I think of this challenge? Honestly, I think it was a combination of hard work and making a lot of mistakes. The original goal was to earn double the amount needed for the Joja route, but if any of you decide to try this challenge yourself, I would actually recommend aiming for 500,000 gold instead. That would make things much more interesting. And if you avoid some of the mistakes I made throughout the run, like not choosing the gatherer profession, repairing the greenhouse through Joja instead of the community center, or simply repairing it a little too late, I'm pretty confident that 500,000 gold is achievable. And that's talking about money on hand. If we are counting total lifetime earnings, even I ended up earning close to 600,000 gold during the run. So overall, this was a really fun challenge. Now, I'm curious about something. What's your favorite flower in real life? For me, I'm still stuck deciding between Dahlia, Rose and Lotus. So that's all for today, and I'll see you in the next one.